Hi everyone, welcome to Matt's Ukulele Theory. We're going to look at minor scales today. So far we've looked at chromatic scales, which is all the notes in the Western world. We've looked at major scales, which are kind of like the mummy and daddy scales from where a lot of other scales are built from. Today we're going to have a look at minor scales. And minor scales are a bit more unusual than major scales in that there are three different types. I held up four fingers, don't know why. And we're going to investigate why is that and what's the point of them. So minor scales will apply to any song that's written in a minor key. And minor keys tend to have a kind of a sadder sounding quality than major keys. They tend to be used for pieces of music that are slightly darker, more melancholy in nature. So here's an example of a C natural minor scale. Notice the far more kind of dark and melancholy tone as compared to C major. Feels a bit like the sun's come out again. So the C natural scale can be thought of in a different couple of ways in terms of construction. The first way to think of it in terms of construction is a formula, just like we have with the major scales. Now, if you're not sure what whole and half steps are, just go back to my first video on the chromatic scales and all will be revealed. But here we have the formula for a natural minor scale. We have a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a half step, a whole step and a whole step. Now, I kind of have this musical kind of phrase that helps me remember this. It's a bit ridiculous, but when hot, why won't he wear white? When hot, why won't he wear white? That's how I remember it. Now, I've already done the C minor scale up there. Let's do the A minor scale just as an example so you can see how it works. So if I start with A, okay, then I'm going to go a whole step, which gives us B. I'm going to go a half step. Remember, because elephants fart in an earlier video, there is no B sharp, so the next one is C. I'm going to go a whole step, gives us D. I'm going to give us another whole step, gives us E. I'm going to go a half step, and again, there's no E sharp, so that's F. Another whole step, G, and then the stop check to check that we've gone back to the start, another whole step and take us back to A. So there's our A minor scale. An A minor scale has no sharps or flats in it. The same as a C major scale, in fact. That's why it's the minor equivalent of C major. I mentioned this in the last video, but we'll explore this in a further video when we're going to look at the circle of fifths. Okay, but this is an A minor. I've written out all our minor scales in the key of C today, just because then we can kind of compare them to the C major scale that we were doing a couple of videos ago. Another way of thinking about a scale is in relation to the major scale. So you know how I said in an earlier video that the major scales were kind of like the mummy or daddy scales that everything else is built from. Well, this is another way of thinking about the minor scale is in relation to the major scale. So the C major scale is C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now, if you compare that to the minor scale is the same thing, but the third is flatted. That just means the third note along becomes a flat. So instead of E, it's E flat. The sixth note is flatted, so the sixth note along has become a flat. And the seventh note is flatted, and that's become a flat. And that's another way of thinking about scales, is to compare them to the major scale. So the natural minor scale is the same as major scale, only it has a flatted third, a flatted sixth, and a flatted seven. Let's play it and see how it sounds. So I've done it on the board. You may not be able to see this too well, but I'll kind of talk you through it as we go as well. So what we're going to do, we're just going to pick all the strings with our right hand, just using our thumb for now. Okay, not going to worry too much about technique for today. This is just about learning the scale. So what we have is we have an open C string, that's your tonic, that's the first note that we start from. We have a D, so far same as the C major scale. But the next note, instead of an E, we have an E flat, and to play that we just play the 3rd fret of the C string. So we've got C, D, E flat, then we go to an F, a G. Now we only go up one more step now because we want an A flat, one more half step even, or 1 fret, because we want an A flat rather than an A. Okay. Then we have a B flat down here at the 1st fret, and then to finish it off we can play a C. So we've gone the right way through. Let's do that again. So it's open C, 2nd fret for D, 3rd fret for E flat, 1st fret for F, 3rd for G, 4th for A flat, 1st fret for B flat, and C. So a nice way of practicing that is just to play it up and down a few times. Just get a feel. And just like when we looked at the major scale, try and correspond your finger to whichever fret you're playing. So when we play as A flat, use your little finger because it's the 4th fret, and you'll get that nice smooth transition. Okay. Now, why are there these other 2 scales? And it's all to do with approaching the tonic. That means when we've gone all the way through the scale and we come back to the first note again, this C in this case, we want a certain amount of tension, or we want the note to lead us into that tonic note. Now, have a listen to the C major scale. I know we're going back to C major again, but just have a listen. Notice that those last 2 notes are only half a step away. And that B wants to resolve to that C. When you play it on its own, it's like a little cliffhanger that wants to go to that C to resolve it. And that's really useful for composers, that build-up of tension and release. Now, the problem that composers found with the natural minor scale is that when we get to the note before the tonic, i.e. the last note of the scale approaching the first note of the next scale, I'll show you what I mean. Okay, it's 2 away from the C. It doesn't resolve as nicely. In fact, you could kind of play through the scale and kind of just rest there and it feels okay. Now, look what happens if we change this B flat to a B. You'll suddenly hear a lot more tension on this B, releasing when it goes to this C. We'll do the original one first, one more time to put it in your ears. So this is the natural minor scale. Now listen when we change that B flat to a B. See how it wants to resolve to that C. Let's do it again. So this is now the harmonic minor scale. It has that lovely resolution. And this is called the harmonic minor scale because harmonically it's really interesting the way it can resolve to that C. It creates lots of harmonic possibilities with chords and then intertwining them with the melody. So this is why this scale was born. And notice all that's happened is it's exactly the same scale as the natural minor, only the 7th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, has been raised by 1 fret or half a step. Okay, so it's just shifted along 1 to make it sit right next to the tonic, which is this C. And you can think of this as a formula. So in comparison to a major scale, it still has the flatted third, still has the flatted sixth, but the 7 is no longer flatted. And that gives us that really lovely resolution. I'll do that one more time. I'm just playing a C minor chord at the end there. That's 0, 3, 3, 3. Okay. So if you want to try it at home, let's just find the notes. We've got open C, 2nd fret for D, 3rd fret for E flat, 1st fret for F, 3rd fret for G, 4th fret for A flat, and then we go to the 2nd fret now for the B, and then we finish with the C. Okay. Now that's why and how the harmonic scale was born. Now there's slight problem with this harmonic scale that composers found when they were composing songs. There was something in it which was unsettling, and it didn't work so well when they were trying to compose pieces. And that's because we've raised the 7th. There's now this big gap between the flatted 6th and the 7th. It's a really, really kind of big gap. It doesn't quite sit right. And then it's a really big gap from that A flat right up to this B. And let's have a look at how big that gap is. If we go from this A flat, we've got A flat, we've got an A, open A, we've got a B flat, and then this B. It's 1.5 steps. That's way too big in a scale. It doesn't feel quite comfortable. It feels a bit weird, like there's something missing in the middle of the scale. So what some clever person decided to do was, instead of just raising just the 7th, if we raise the 6th note, the A, from an A flat to an A, it's got rid of that really horrible big gap. Okay, so the melodic scale, because it sounds lovely and melodious, is C. I'll try and move my uke so you can see the scale behind me. C, D, E flat, F, G. Now instead of A flat, we have open A, just the bottom string open, and then a B and a C. So C, D, E flat, F, G, open A, B, and then the C. Now, it almost sounds like a major scale, doesn't it? When we relate it back to the major scale, let's write it out. The formula is almost the same, look. Because we've sharpened that 6th, we've taken it back to a normal 6th. The only difference between this and a major scale is this flatted 3rd. Okay, so it can be used in songs if they're wanting a bit more of a melodious, kind of not quite as dark a sound as say a harmonic minor, or especially the natural minor. But the brilliant thing is, now that we have no big gap, and we have that lovely resolution. Now, here's something interesting. With that, all those alterations, they're all to do with approaching this note here. The first note, again, the tonic note. It's all to do with the relationship between the 7th note and the first of the next scale, the tonic. And because it's moving forward, and it's that relationship of going from that note to that one and resolving to that one, on the way back, if I'm coming down the scale, we don't really need to worry about that, because we're not resolving to that C anymore. It's not a problem. So what musicians do is they play, whenever they play the melodic scale, they play the melodic on the way up, and on the way down, they play the natural minor scale. So it keeps that lovely kind of minor feeling to the piece. So that's a really important thing to remember, that whenever you're using that melodic minor, on the way down, in fact I'll write it in, way back down, use natural minor. Now, just an important little aside before I go. You might be thinking, well, why do I need to know these scales? Now, for me, the most important thing in terms of learning scales, we looked at how they help you to learn the fretboard and understand how songs work, and that's really, really important. But the other thing is they help you to kind of understand pieces of music and where they're likely to go. So if you analyse a piece of music and you look at the notes and they seem to be using the natural minor, and how do we know they're using the natural minor? Because they have both this flatted sixth and flatted seventh, and you can spot it. Now, if those notes are used quite common, we know we're dealing with the natural minor. So if we're trying to work out how a song goes, we know that the palette is going to use these 7 notes. Some composers will steal a few notes from other keys, but in general it will be those 7. So it'll help you to work out a song. If a song's in the harmonic minor, you'll know it's in the harmonic minor because you'll see lots of these normal sevenths instead of flatted sevenths, in which case you know that we can use these 7 notes to work out where the song is going. And it helps you to be able to kind of second guess where composers are going. But also, once you get these scales under your fingers and you know where to find these notes, it means that when you're playing pieces by particular composers, you'll find it a lot easier to play. Your fingers will find the right places. And that's why I found these scales really, really useful to learn. When I solo, sometimes I use these scales, but generally when I solo on the uke, I'll tend to use something called minor pentatonics or major pentatonics, and we're going to have a look at those in the next video. Or I use blues scales, or sometimes I alter my scale with the chords, and I use something called chord scale theory, which you'll see much later on. But in general, the main reason is just to understand what composers are doing to make it easier for you to play. Okay, I'll see you in the next video, and keep practicing your minor scales.